Hello and welcome to Watching Brief for the month of December 2017. Today is going to be a slightly different Watching Brief than usual, but as usual, I am joined by my lovely co-host Andy Brockman.
Good morning, Mark. Happy solstice.
Good morning. Happy Christmas, man. It's Christmas. I don't give a monkeys.
Or winter fast, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, Saturnalia, etc., etc.
Exactly.
But nonetheless, happy Winter Solstice Festival of your choice. And this month, we're going to be doing Secret Banta. See what we did there? Yeah, Secret Banta. And this is basically going to be a bit of a roundup of the year. And we're going to be picking some of our favourite topics for each other to talk about from 2017, with a bit of a look forward to 2018 as well, a bit later on. Now,
how in a year's time and see just how wrong we were.
Yes, exactly. We can. Yes, and you can be smug. You can comment down below and say you were incorrect. Stonehenge does not even exist anymore.
It's been ground up for hardcore features.
Indeed, yeah. They're building the bridge to the spaceport to Mars out of it. So, how are we going to do this? How are we going to choose our random topics? And, well, at my end, I've got a little Santa bowl here in which we have our topics ready to go. So they've been randomised by Santa's rotund belly here, and they're good to go. What about you, Andy?
Well, I have a beautiful seasonal German biscuit tin.
Yeah.
Which again, the random Banter Generator has generated again some picks. So
Excellent.
We'll see what comes out.
Wonderful. So Secret Banter is good to go. And I don't know who goes first. Do you want to go first?
I suppose I am the guest on Archeo Soup, aren't I? So yes. I suppose taking a seasonal first footing, I suppose. So first footing, I'm reaching into the tin. And, what have I got?
Oh, this is so exciting.
I have got. Oh dear. It's a sort of serious. Someone obviously thinks that we need to bring a bit of gravitas to the proceedings.
Okay.
It's Viking identities. Sweden destroying artifacts. Yo.
Oh, yes. Okay,
well,
okay. Well, of course, we mentioned various winter solstice festivals of your choice, and Yule, of course, is and was, I suppose, depending on who you are, where you are, potentially a Norse festival of the winter. Certainly, it was in ancient times for the Vikings. It was the winter festival of light. And then along came the church and said, well, Jesus is the light of the world. Let us combine these ideas. And out of that came some weird...
Cultural appropriation, I think that's called.
Exactly, yeah. But out of that came things like the Yule log, and like potentially things like the Christmas tree, all sorts of stuff like that. It's very exciting stuff. But, okay. From earlier this year, this Viking Identities malarkey, I'm still yet to calm down about it. But how do you feel about people in the US insisting that their Swedish modern Viking identity is being threatened?
I think it's just part of the general appropriation of bits of culture to reinforce people's sense of lack of identity in a modern, rapidly changing world.
Oh, okay.
I think people are looking back to the past as an anchor, really, in some cases. And I think for certain people, identifying with a past culture and what's perceived as Viking culture seems particularly popular.
Yeah.
It is one that many people find comfort in. I think that obviously one of the things we looked at then, and I think it's an ongoing issue, is the association of appropriating Viking stroke Germanic culture as it's perceived by people on the far right.
Yeah, and that's where it sort of blurs into sort of Teutonic and even sort of further to the right. And is that the right? No, that's the left. No, that's the... I don't know which way is which. It's such a perfect analogy for the modern world. But no, it is an interesting situation because it has been in many respects hijacked as a safe place for people to talk about very controversial perspectives on the world, but by referring to what they view as a historic perspective on the world. But then again, also, actually, it's worthwhile mentioning that there's also some interesting pushes in the other direction. So, for example, an awful lot was made earlier this year, you may recall, of the fabric that supposedly had the name Allah found in a grave in I think it was Norway. Can't quite remember where it was. But apparently that's not entirely that simple either. So people are rushing to try and find these connections with the wider world. And funnily enough, they're making the wrong connections. For example, actually one of my favourite genuine historical finds that really illustrates Norse connections on an international scale is the Buddha bucket from the Usaberg ship. That is such a magnificent little thing. It's a bucket, and where the handle meets the bucket, there's a little, I think, enamel, maybe golden as well, little Buddha. And it just shows that even if they didn't fully understand what these things were, or for example, the dirham coins from the Middle East that often turn up in Norse graves, they were certainly collecting things from the Islamic world, from the Buddhist world, and bringing them towards themselves. These were not closed off individuals, and I think that's one of the strongest things to take away from the Vikings, but also frankly actually just this whole period, the Yule festival, whatever, it's a positive time. We shouldn't be trying to shut ourselves off from others.
Absolutely. And if you look at again just at the Viking period, people who try and adopt it for their modern identity politics actually miss out completely on the idea that, as we increasingly understand, many aspects of our past were very cosmopolitan. Many cultures were feeding into the cultural mainstream at any point in history, whether it's Alexandria under Cleopatra, or whether it's Rome under the Julian Caesars, or Byzantium, the Varangian Guard. Byzantium is absolutely the hinge between East and West, between Christianity and Islam, between different versions of Christianity and Islam. So and all the other cultural streams that were going on as well. So I guess in the end, that whole story really typified why we mustn't try and over simplify the past. We must be open to
and also in that sense, if we oversimplify the past, we dramatically oversimplify the present. It is as simple as that. And one of my favourite things, actually, when it comes to Byzantium, is it is in that sense very much a meeting point. Constantinople became Byzantium, became Istanbul, and you have this moment where the East and West met. And then, actually, if you look at, for example, the symbol or the symbology of the Russian Tsars, for example, they adopted the two-headed eagle, didn't they, as their icon. So it's almost like this moment where East and West met, and then today East and West maybe are they drifting apart, but they're certainly distinct again. And it's a fascinating place, Istanbul. If you maybe I should do a video on it in the new year for Arceus, possibly.
That sounds like a very smart idea. Anyway, so having dealt with identity politics and cultural appropriation and all that sort of, what's your first pick?
Okay, my first pick is, let's see. Right.
It's nice to get
shake it
first, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's nice to get the simple topics out the way first.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. The non-controversial, jolly topics. Okay.
Absolutely.
Here we go.
What have you
pick
got?
up this one, put it back. There we go. And what do we have? Ooh. And again, back on the topic of your winter solstice festival of choice, the winter equinox. Obviously, it's going to be celebrated at Stonehenge. It's in 2 days' time or 1 day's time. 22nd.
Yeah,
Is it?
yes,
So a couple of days' time, and you have mentioned, or sorry, I want you to talk about this because Stonehenge is likely to be one of the defining heritage stories of 2018, and in fact, it was a big story this year as well. And on top of that, I suppose its impact for similar monuments on the global stage when it comes to the UNESCO. So there we go. Who says we're not having fun in this Christmas special?
Well, I'm going to talk about parking.
Okay. Oh, parking.
Well, no, because I think if you want to look at the state of culture, heritage culture in Britain at the end of 2017, and the place it has in society and in the eyes of the organisations that curate it on our behalf and on behalf of the and on behalf of the government. I think one of the most interesting things is that the first notice I saw for the Stonehenge winter solstice celebration, and as we now know, Stonehenge is primarily a winter monument. It's not the new research suggests that the alignments are to the midwinter sunset or sunrise rather, and not midsummer as it was once thought. But
of course,
no, the first
King Arthur
notice
Pendragon knew that already.
Well,
Naturally.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
No, but I mean, the first notice I saw about it, about this year's commemoration from English Heritage, was basically saying parking's limited, sort your parking out, or don't come by car.
Oh, how wonderfully British! How wonderfully British! It's like the Olympics. When the Olympics came to London, people were going, "What about the parking? This street is residents only. Keep things the same," he says, quoting another comedian. I don't want to take credit for that, but it's true.
Look.
It's true. British people are obsessed with parking.
Absolutely. And in fact, the A303 past Stonehenge in the summer can be one giant car park, and that's
it can
not the problem.
be. Yeah, it can be. It's in the future, this will be part of the monumental landscape. The car park.
People have seriously argued that it's actually wrong to take the road out because the road's part of the archaeological story.
Yeah, it is. It is. It really is. It really is. It drearily is. It really is. And actually, speaking of which, I mean, when it comes to the Druids, presumably there's going to have to be
Druids. Hang on, where have the Druids come from?
Sorry. When it comes to the people who would like to attend the winter equinox.
You mean the people who've recreated an impression of what they think a prehistoric religion was like, also dealing with which also grew out of the 18th century Enlightenment and the development of regional identities,
and actually archaeologists themselves.
And
trying to understand the monument. Yeah, we made this rod for our own backs. We made that connection with the Druids. And
we need to name names here. William Stukely created this rod for our backs.
Yeah, but he was an early archaeologist. He was trying his best. But goodness me, I wouldn't mind giving him a light slap. but apart from that, actually, speaking of which, I saw the other day there's a TV series coming soon, or maybe it's already out, called Britannia.
Oh, it looks wonderful.
It does.
And I know what you're going to say now. I know what you're going to say.
In that trailer, you've got Druids at Stonehenge. Stonehenge, which looks actually so neat and tidy. It's like all the chunks of rock are little Mars bars. They're immensely... But anyway,
it's TV. It's fake news. In all seriousness, the producers of that were being quoted recently saying, they were getting their retaliation against people like us in first.
Yeah,
they're saying it's not historically accurate. It's like Game of Thrones.
I've mentioned this before. What's the fucking point? just set it somewhere else. Don't call it Britannia and have Romans and Britons. Don't. Oh. Anyway, okay. So back to my point. Back to my original point regarding parking.
Yeah.
Back to parking. He says, pushing his imaginary glasses up. Will they have chariot-only parking spaces?
Or ox cart only parking spaces?
Ox carts, yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Because actually, Stonehenge was a Bronze Age monument, and in the Bronze Age, they invented the wheel. So we should have something for those carts.
Indeed. And obviously for the... we should have sort of walking only parking spaces as well for people that couldn't afford the ox cart or the pony or the chariot. Now, I mean, I think getting back
Get
to
your bunions treated here.
I'm getting back to the original idea of Stonehenge marking. I think why this one is important is that the relationship between past and present is really important in all discussions about heritage in the modern landscape, whether it's a city landscape or a rural landscape or whatever. On Salisbury Plain at Stonehenge, we've got a World Heritage Site, which also happens to be...
At the moment.
I'm coming on to that.
Okay, sorry.
Coming on to that. But which also happens to be English Heritage's one of their biggest cash cow properties, and that's English Heritage at the moment. It's an organisation that is trying to meet financial targets set by the government and to become fully financially independent.
Aspirational
it
targets
needs to maximise its take from Stonehenge. So they need to maximise the attraction of the landscape to visitors and to get people to get the footfall through their visitor centre. But pulling against that is the World Heritage status and the fact that UNESCO have condemned the government's preferred option for removing a bottleneck on the A303 past Stonehenge, which is to dig a tunnel. But to dig a tunnel which has entrances within the World Heritage Site, and which a lot of archaeologists argue are intensely damaging to the archaeological landscape potentially. So, and I just think that however that is resolved, it is going to become one of the defining stories of heritage in 2018 and actually going forward through the next few years. It is currently highly controversial. It's going to become more so, and it's going to end up in a place where nobody's probably satisfied.
That's also very British.
You mean sitting on the fence, basically?
No, I mean I have to say I in this instance, I mean, there are archaeologists out there who also say this could be a potential to effectively do an archaeological survey underground. It also partly depends on process as well. Yeah. If it's a numb, just boring machine, that could be atrocious. But if there is a provision, given that this is a one-off, unique opportunity, there may also be archaeology to be found. So I'm not so much on the fence. I am very much concerned, but as you say, we're going to see where that goes in the coming year. Okay, right, my turn. Next one. Here we go. Shake it out.
Is it your turn? Or is it my turn?
Oh, sorry. I'm just too excited. I just love. Sorry.
I know it's Christmas. It's like actually. It's like being really, really excited on Christmas morning when you're a kid, isn't it? And getting up, you get up at 3 o'clock and you go through to your parent and they tell you to go away.
Yeah, bouncing on the bed. Yeah, that's me.
That's the one.
Andy.
Yeah, and of course, what our audience doesn't realise is that like all the seasonal TV programmes, like the New Year's Eve shows and the Christmas Eve shows and so on, we're actually recording this in August.
Oh yeah.
So,
yes.
No, actually,
yes,
we're not
that organised.
We're not actually. No, there is a certain integrity about Archaeo Soup and the Watching Brief. Astonishingly,
it is the 20th of December.
Anyway, what have we got? What have we got? And the random Banter Generator comes up with how could you? This is wonderful. The March for Science and Flat Earthers.
Oh, yes, it really has been a year for that, hasn't it? I remember, what month was that? That was back in April, I think. There was the March for Science, and we live in weird times in that sense. The fact that people feel the need to march for science. I'm trying. This is the Christmas special. I don't want to be overly partisan or political here, but the fact that people feel that there is a need for a march for science is astonishing. Especially in the US, in a country where science has taken them to the moon. Science has given them tremendous power in the world, and yet people having to march in defence of it. But there's also some weird developments where words are being banned. You're not allowed to use words in the Centre for Disease Control lately, including words like science-based
and evidence-based.
Evidence-based.
Yeah.
And like how is that offensive to have something which is evidence-based? I mean, the evidence is that it is roughly Christmas time. That's not a political statement.
No, it's
There's
certainly
stuff behind me.
You can see Tony is decorated with tinsel and fairy lights, which definitely tells me it's Christmas.
Exactly. Yeah, there's some evidence there, but we can't.
Absolutely. It's empirical.
It's just astonishing. I mean, wait, do you? Because the thing is, you're admittedly a little bit older than me, and I imagine you're probably. You tend to take a slightly more it'll all come out in the wash kind of perspective on things. I mean, where do you stand on this? Do you think in 4 years' time with the new administration it'll go back to normal or what? Because it's just so weird. I just want to reiterate.
Yeah.
Words being banned is just bonkers. But anyway, go on.
Well, I think we need to be clear. Actually, it's not, in the case of the CDC, it's not words being banned. It's staff have been advised, apparently, that if they're preparing documents for the US government and for the White House in particular, I can't think why this might be important, they're not supposed to use words like, evidence-based, science-based, also other words like transgender and so on. So, this is part of a sort of a cultural conflict, I guess. It's been in the news a lot. Certainly the science community, first of all in the States, but I think also here. Where do I stand? You asked me. I think there is a general perception at the moment that we're in a political and cultural climate where a significant part, certainly of the political class and the media that supports that part of the political class, naming no names, Fox News, Breitbart, the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail.
You just named names.
I did. I'm sorry, I said I wasn't going to as well, didn't I? But there is a certain part of political discourse now which says that belief is more important than evidence. So therefore, believing that Brexit is a fantastic thing is better than the evidence that maybe there might be a few more downsides than the government is currently admitting.
And I suppose again, not again trying not to be actually political about it, just making it a statement, a simple factual statement.
I've got to be political.
No. I mean, in so much as I don't want just people to just go, oh yeah, it's
absolutely.
It's genuinely a cry in desperation here, because the belief in something does not change. Just because someone believes in something or someone else believes in something else doesn't mean that your beliefs are inherently wrong. It's not a binary situation, ironically, with words like transgender. It's not. So if, for example, there's a little festive Christmas tree that a friend of mine sent me that has all the words in there. So words like fetus, diversity, vulnerable, entitlement, transgender, science-based and evidence-based, little star on top. And if I use, for example, the word transgender, just because someone else doesn't think that transgender even should be a thing, doesn't mean it's not a thing. It's what I mean. Not talking about it doesn't get rid of it. It's such a strange. It's like a toddler, actually, because toddlers go, no, not talking about no. It's not the real world, and I think that's the thing I find most astonishing about it. It's just
I think, in a sense, the slightly reassuring part.
Also, there's one more thing. Sorry, fetus isn't inherently linked with the right to choose, as it were, or abortion. Fetus is a medical term for an in utero baby which is growing. It's not politically charged. It shouldn't be. But so go on.
No, all I was going to say was that I think if there is a reassuring part of all this, it's that at some point, usually in these arguments, reality intervenes. You know, if the flat earthers set off for the edge of the world, they suddenly discover actually they don't fall off the edge. They end up back where they started.
Speaking of which, are we hoping to see that launch finally in 2018? Do you want to see Mike? Do we want to see Mike make it?
Oh, we're going to poke. We're going to poke. Yes, absolutely. Well, we need. Mind you, I'm reminded of the Monty Python sketch with the sheep in the tree and the yokel who look at them and they talk about flying sheep, and he says, "You will observe how these sheep do not so much fly as plummet." There are, as I said, reality usually intrudes, as do the laws of physics. Although, really interestingly, actually, just this morning, just before we started recording this, I was listening to the Today programme on Radio 4 on the BBC, and one of their main items is that the BBC has announced that it's going to be giving increased airtime to covering religion. So,
but doesn't the BBC already have quite a lot of, like, they have the daily service and...
They do, and in fact on the Today programme they have a thing called Thought for the Day, which is very controversial because it's restricted to religious groups of all kinds.
As opposed to various philosophies.
So it's not just Christian, it reflects the religious spread of modern British society that the BBC is serving. But they don't allow humanists and atheists to do a Thought for the Day.
Do they allow Scientology?
We're talking about religion here, not corporations and money-making operations. I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
Anyway, okay, so moving on to our next Christmas segment. Finally, I get to do my Santa vodka shake, or cocktail shake. There we go, and here we go. Right, and Santa back over here. Oh, what's it going to be? I can feel your anticipation, and it is. Continuing with the exciting, non-controversial Christmas theme that we've got going here, and it's like the EU transition period during Brexit to maintain current environmental regulations supporting commercial archaeology and our ability to hold polluters to account for as long as possible. Now, hopefully you guys are enjoying some of this, because but no, in all seriousness, this is going to be one of the biggest issues next year, and also, frankly, up until 2019. Actually,
serious topic, but look, cute puppies, cute seasonal puppies.
Oh, I can't.
So,
I'm
too much
hiding
politics.
them. Hold them up, higher up.
I was saying, if there's too much politics, we can do puppies.
Excellent. Yes, puppies. Puppies. Yeah, just here's some puppies to distract you. Okay, so EU transitional period. Now, Brexit apparently means Brexit. It is happening, and at this point, I'm quite resigned to that. I'm not one of those people who unlike some people I know who are desperately trying to get it all reversed. If it's happening, it's happening. But we need to try and make sure it happens in a way which is helpful and useful, and doesn't just sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want access to croissants still. We need access to that hummus.
Prosecco. We need prosecco.
We need prosecco, and also we need decent environmental and archaeological protection in place. I've already mentioned actually in a previous video in this Watching Brief series this year, obviously. And incidentally, this is the 12th episode. This marks a whole year of Watching Brief. I think that's worthwhile mentioning. Yeah. But anyway, so I've mentioned. I mentioned in a previous episode that some people feel strongly, rightly or wrongly, that the EU, especially for example agricultural policy, is bad for archaeology. Now that applies on privately owned land. It certainly doesn't apply in the case of scheduled monuments. All sorts of conversations can be had there. But the point is there are explicit protections under EU law which we subscribe to that protects the historical environment, and at the moment that stuff is very much up for change, up for grabs, and no matter what happens, a straight line continuation is unlikely, I think.
Yeah, I mean, unlike you, I'm not resigned to it at all. I think it's an issue. It's a case of catastrophic national self-harm, potentially.
Oh,
and you know, it would. And I think we were talking about evidence-led issues earlier on. I think this is certainly an issue where all sorts of areas of belief came together to give the political establishment a kicking, a deserved kicking, actually, in many respects. But it's a kicking which is also led to some, will lead to some more self-inflicted damage, and so that's where I'm starting from on this. And I think that the issue and the danger at the moment, you were saying you're not expecting a straight line continuation. I think we're seeing the British government trying to move towards that kind of situation at the moment. There was supposedly a cabinet meeting yesterday where all the members of the cabinet put forward their vision for their
Eurovision.
Their Eurovision. Oh, no, they're non-Eurovision.
Oh, sorry.
Non-Eurovision.
Yes.
Which would have been
actually,
quite.
we're no longer going to be part of Eurovision, are we?
No, come on, Israel's part of the Eurovision Song Contest. They've even won it.
Australia, yeah.
Absolutely, exactly.
Yeah, no, we can be in Eurovision.
Europe is an endlessly elastic concept.
Okay.
Brexit means Brexit. Europe means Europe. It's what you want it to be.
Yeah. Breakfast.
Breakfast means breakfast. Indeed.
Breakfast means breakfast, as they say, as they keep
Absolutely.
on saying. By accident, yeah.
Much simpler choosing breakfast than what you want for breakfast.
Yeah.
Ready Brexit. Keeps you warm in the winter.
Yeah, like Pop-Tarts. Just imagine that for Brexit.
Yeah. No, I mean the issue is, one of the stories that was being floated, one of the kites being flown in the press this week was that the several very influential members of the cabinet from the hard Brexit wing, people like Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, who's current Environment Secretary, who's busy trying to polish up his green credentials, possibly to line himself up for another bid to be leader of the Tory party, but that's another story.
You won't Gove there.
Gove there, no. Absolutely. The kite that was being flown was that they want to abolish the European Working Time Directive, which limits the working week in most cases to 48 hours.
Yes.
And also provides rights to 4 weeks paid holiday a year and things like that. So significant workers' rights that they would like to see that are currently legally enforceable. They'd like to see that that area weakened, and the fear has been that also weakened will be the environmental directives, which include things like the polluter pays and the precautionary principle. We've talked about it before. It's the things that underpin commercial archaeology. If those principles don't stay front and centre in UK law, if we do end up leaving the EU, then we are back where we were in the 1960s, early 1970s, when we had major archaeological sites like Barnard's Castle and the Huggin Hill Bathhouse in London, the Rose Theatre and so on, being trashed by developments because they hadn't been fully investigated and predicted. And it ended up in those days with a huge political mess, ministers having to face awkward questions in Parliament, and the politicians deciding, we really ought to have some regulations around this to make sure that archaeology is done. Otherwise, we talked about inventing the wheel earlier on. We'll probably end up reinventing the wheel in 5, 10, 15 years' time. So, why not just cut to the chase and keep what we've got? Because it works, more or less.
As I keep on thinking to myself, this is not the future I signed up for. This is not. Again, I'm not. It's one of those things where, it's just crazy. I mean, we watched the Muppets Christmas Carol last night.
Oh,
and
yes.
and it feels like we do run the risk of going a bit backwards, and certainly in terms of workers' rights and all that malarkey. And the idea of someone being able to threaten you with unemployment if you don't work the hours they demand, it's unnerving. But then again, I'm essentially self-employed, and I'm a workaholic. I almost have no time off. So who are they to complain? Right, moving on. Did you want to choose the next item?
Absolutely. Oh, let's see what we've got. Let's see what we've got. I'm having to reach out, getting down to the bottom of the tin this time. Well, can we turn this one into something controversial? I don't know. Hadrian's Wall, celebrating in 2017 30 years of being a World Heritage Site.
Yay! Nothing controversial there, surely. Except
what was Hadrian's Wall? Was it a customs barrier? Was it a military barrier?
Yeah.
Was it the Romans trying to take back control of their borders? See what I did there?
Make Roman Empire great again. Make the Empire great again. Yeah, it's Hadrian's Wall.
Build that wall.
Build that wall. Drain the Aquitae. Is that it? Drain the Oceanus. No, in all seriousness, I mean, obviously, for those people at home who aren't fully aware, I essentially live on Hadrian's Wall. I live in Wallsend, and the aptly named Wallsend, because we're at one end of the wall. And Hadrian's Wall is a fantastic monument, although it's not as complete as you might think. There are huge segments due to the fact that Britain has been continuously occupied for the past 20-odd thousand years, and in the past 2,000 years, which have been subject to modification, shall we say. So, for example, as it passes through cities like Newcastle, it's not really visible. But those sections that are visible...
Or it is visible, except that it's bits of it visible in the other buildings where the wall's reused
as the train station, for example. Yeah, exactly, yeah. But where the wall remains above ground, it usually stands at around about 3 or 4 feet tall, and it is undeniably moving through spectacular landscape.
Particularly that middle section around Housesteads, Winchell Crags, and so on. It is just a fabulous place to visit, isn't it?
It's magnificent, and actually, this is a real success story in terms of World Heritage status, in so much as the status has afforded the wall over the years protections against not so much the day-to-day wear and tear, because whenever we go to Hadrian's Wall for a walk or whatever, or even just if I go there for archaeosuit purposes, people are always walking on it. Even though it says you requested not to walk on it, because if everyone does it, as everyone does, eventually it's going to erode away. But more specifically, actually, I remember a couple of years ago there was an instance where I think some Australians had affixed a memorial, as like a makeshift memorial, to the wall near to the famous Sycamore Gap, where Kevin Costner, Kevin Costner and Morgan Freeman had their little battle when they were travelling from
Beachy Head,
essentially,
Nottingham, which was actually Carcassonne.
Yeah, exactly. Was it really? Blimey.
I think so, if I remember rightly, yeah.
Oh man! So it's very. Basically,
it's medieval. Those medieval maps, they weren't as accurate as the modern ones.
There's an astonishing feat especially in one day, to travel the length of England in that time. But the point is that they affixed this memorial there, and it's because of the status, the protective status, it was dealt with in a way that was easy to achieve, and that's a very roundabout way of saying basically that people have something to fall back on in terms of protecting the monument. Because also actually this year, for example, we've also seen an announcement of sort of cooperation between the Great Wall of China and Hadrian's Wall. And actually, here's a Christmas joke for you, Christmas cracker joke for you. What did Hadrian's Wall say to the Great Wall of China?
I don't know. What did Hadrian's Wall say to the Great Wall of China?
Keep your chin up. Spelt Qin.
I'm going to say... Yeah.
But no, it's allowed these sort of almost like international sort of emeritus. Not to go back to Brexit, but emeritus kind of things to occur where you can have cooperation. There's a notoriety, there was protection, and it's just generally good for the profile of the monument. So well done.
Although I did see on social media some suggestions from various people connected with Hadrian's Wall who weren't who appear to have missed the quote consultation around this particular link up. That this had as much to do with modern sort of heritage and national politics and wanting to make links outside Europe, and basically people wanted to go on a jolly. As much as to any actual concrete.
Well, and actually, has not our illustrious Prime Minister been announced? A former Prime Minister, Mr. Cameron, been given the job now of trying to help promote Britain in China. So there is a political element there. There is, but I think that as I say, 30 years.
Mind you, I've seen that movie, and I know that I'm not sure if there's an equivalent. Actually, perhaps there is an equivalent on Hadrian's Wall with something like the Lambton Worm. But so there was that recent movie that showed how the
dragon
China was actually built to defend China against the lizard monsters that Matt Damon was fighting.
Yes. Fact. Absolutely.
Well, it's a Hollywood movie, so it must be factual.
Yeah, although actually, interestingly, as well in that respect, that is, I'm amazed that the film wasn't trashed, as it were, in China, and to my knowledge it wasn't, in so much as my understanding is that dragons and those sorts of monsters are actually positive elements in Chinese culture, for example. And also, similarly, I do believe, in Wales as well, dragons aren't always negative. It's only those pessimistic, cynical English who assume that nature is something to be tamed and is dangerous. And yes. Anyway, I'm getting way off topic here. Sorry, Mr. Brockman.
No, nothing. Dragons are great.
Yeah, dragons are magnificent, and
I love the story. We talked about binaries earlier. There's that wonderful story about the red dragon and the white dragon underneath Mount Snowdon fighting I think it's Mount Snowdon in the Mabinogion.
Yes,
where they're fighting for control.
Yes, great. And it's an allegory for the Saxons and the Welsh.
Indeed,
fighting.
Indeed.
Yes.
Yep.
And
Welsh, those foreigners.
Yes. Well, Welha means foreigner in Old English. Yes.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. Have I told you this before?
No. It's just that you're quite right to point out to any of our audience who don't pick that up that it was actually a smart-ass joke I was trying to make rather than yeah.
So. Your smart-arsery to one side. As I say, congratulations to Hadrian's Wall, 30 years, and long may that status continue.
And actually, I have to say, I didn't get to see it, but there was a TV documentary about it last week, which, for me, being again, I have to confess to being a Romanist and originally, and being a bit geeky about things like Roman armor and that sort of thing. Absolutely, yeah. And one of the highlights of the year was English Heritage mounting a parade and display by 30 modern professional riders and stunt riders, recreating a terma of Roman cavalry, a whole troop of Roman cavalry.
It was a big deal, actually,
and wonderful and exciting.
Yeah, it was quite a big deal. You were encouraged to support either the red team or the blue team, and actually they did come to Segedunum, the fort here in Wallsend, and at one point I do believe, or certainly there was something linked with it. There was an ancillary event at least.
It was a festival. It was Hadrian's cavalry was part of the festival.
Yeah, it's magnificent. Yeah. Although actually that's something that really bothers my wife as a classicist in her initial former life, as it were, before going into the real world. She really hates that Coldplay song "Viva la Vida," where it talks about Roman cavalry choirs. She's like, and just sort of she hates it. I love the song, but she
I do too, actually. But that line,
Coldplay.
What the heck is that about?
Okay, moving on. Okay, is it my turn?
It is your turn.
I think it is my turn. Okay, so once again, the cocktail shaker. And here we go. Oh, oh. I would like you to talk about the box set of Detectorists, and why it is potentially filling a gap for you left by Time Team, the absence of Time Team.
Well, first of all, along with a lot of archaeologists, I really like Detectorists as a program. It's just finished its third, and what the creator, writer, director of it, Mackenzie Crook, has said will be its last series. And it finished on a positive, warm note with Andy and Bex getting a house, and at the very last image was the magical magpies depositing gold coins on Andy and Lance on the field where we saw the Roman burial horde burial recreated in the first episode. So it went out on a very warm note.
Warm and squidgy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a sort of sleeper hit for the BBC. It started off really without much fanfare at all. It's just become a sort of cult program, and I think it's probably going to continue to be so. I mean, it's a bit like 40 Towers. They only made 2 series and 12 programs. It continues to be shown and it continues to be remembered. And I think as a piece of TV craft, it's brilliantly done. It's beautifully written, beautifully acted, beautifully shot. So it's a thoroughly classy product. But for me, I think looking behind that, it's about one of the things it's about is about our relationship with the past and with the landscape. And that's what Time Team was about as well. Time Team led originally, of course, by Mick Aston, who was one of the people who virtually created landscape archaeology, modern landscape archaeology, when he was working at Bristol and Shatwick Project in Somerset. So,
well, and also just briefly, just to expand upon that, the idea as well that landscapes aren't, in particular, for example, towns and the way that we view how people manifest their habitation in the landscape, that isn't as static as we sometimes imagine, and the idea of reimagining, especially for example a township, is nothing new. We often think that that's something that only we do. We sort of, since the 1960s, we'll put up a shopping centre, then demolish it, and then put up some flats and demolish that. But actually, that work Mick Aston pioneered this idea, this re-examination of the idea of a timeless, especially a timeless British landscape, definitely.
Absolutely. But I think the other thing that about Time Team, partly because again the politics of people like Mick Aston and Tony Robinson, it was very egalitarian. It was people's archaeology. It was about opening up archaeology of the past to a mass audience, and in fact it was criticised for that by some academics when it first started. It was sort of shock horror that the ordinary people who haven't been to university might even want to get involved in doing archaeology. Yeah, absolutely. And the
people who don't smoke pipes, what?
Absolutely, even bally women. The thing about.
But how will they kneel with their skirts? Like, how will they do the digging? Yeah. Sorry.
Absolutely. Now, also, and again, it was pointed out in an article several articles actually in the Guardian, amongst other places recently. But Detectorists also gives a very benign image of metal detecting. It's a very gentle pastime undertaken by men, really, primarily men, really almost as a sort of social therapy. It's and also I'm in this last episode.
It's the ghost of Christmas banter.
Absolutely. I I know how the Prime Minister felt at the Tory Party conference when the set started to collapse.
Well, it's funny actually because often the conversations that you see, I think, in that series, they could and would take place in a pub. You know, so in a TV series in the 1970s, it would be Rodney and Del Boy, you know, in the pub or something. You know, it is, as you say, it's a nice sort of surrogate where you know, these men are meeting and talking about their daily troubles. Yeah,
absolutely. But when it comes to the attitude to the past, you've got. It's pointed out really at the end of that last episode when the Lance, the Toby Jones character, is given a speech where he ends up saying, "We're the time travelers." But what that is doing, my concern about it is, and the reason I've juxtaposed it with Time Team, is that actually, certainly in TV terms, in popular culture terms, that image of metal detecting, that and at the other end of it we see atrocities like Nazi war diggers, aka Battlefield Recovery, and the other artifact-led TV shows that we're seeing at the moment.
Which we may also be talking about another show next year, I think, by the sounds of it. But we shall come back to that.
We shall maybe come back to that.
But the point is, they're charismatic, and
those shows have appropriated the past for a popular audience. Archaeologists haven't even tried to replicate them.
No.
So Time Team went about 3 years ago now. It's last season, and okay, you can argue that maybe the format had run its course, but it hasn't been. You know, the only we don't have any more evidence-led, as we were talking about earlier, process-driven TV archaeology that talks about how we find out about our past and how exciting it is to find out about our past. What we've got now are character-driven, which Time Team also was. Time Team was about characters. Time Team was a police procedural.
But nonetheless, people and producers who assume that the access and the democratization of this stuff means dumbing down, it means letting people who don't have established process do it and this kind of thing, as opposed to actually consulting with archaeologists.
It means self-identified experts rather than people who are recognised as experts, as all the people who worked on Time Team were. Okay, one of the reasons for that is the change in the sort of in TV culture, the TV financial ecosystem, where something like Nazi War Diggers is cheap, whereas something like Time Team wasn't.
No,
Time Team was multi-camera setups, big crews, and people providing with expertise and expensive kit and so on. People coming along, bringing their own metal detector and finding stuff. A lot cheaper to do, and you don't have to write the report afterwards.
No. Anyway, I shall bring us to a close there. I suppose I'll also just mention as well, very briefly, that I have seen some archaeology friends, for example, Dr. David Petts, for example, on the Facebooks, talking about how he was blubbing at the final finale of the Detectorist series. So as much as there are questions to be answered, I think, by archaeologists in terms of the public presentation of archaeology, as ever, this series seems to have been quite lovely. So I'll definitely give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Christmas is time for the box sets, and also 3 series of Detectorist is a lot shorter than if you're diving into Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, well of course, yeah, naturally, yeah.
And less controversial than watching House of Cards.
Yeah, and hopefully less nudity. I don't really want to see Toby Jones naked. Anyway, moving on. Do you want to pick the next segment? Yeah, I think. Oh, well, it's the last one. Okay.
And we're back in TV land.
Okay.
Well, I have got Vikings series 1 to 4 on. I think was it Netflix?
Actually, no. Actually,
Oh,
it's not
it's
available on the
not. It's
Netflix. No. But I've this year, this year, I have watched once again the entirety of the Vikings TV series seasons, and recently, a couple of months ago, season 4.5, because they're releasing them now in halfly segments, was released on DVD, and
just like Star Trek Discovery, actually.
yeah, I don't know. Don't get me started on Star Trek Discovery. They should have done it after Voyager. Just set it after Voyager, and it's not controversial. It
And
doesn't conflict with the established timeline. Set it after Voyager. Sorry, go on.
Absolutely, and of course, the captain isn't an archaeologist like he was in the Next Generation.
No, exactly. But anyway, Star Trek Voyager.
Anyway,
Star Trek Voyager. Put it over there. No, Star Trek Discovery. Sorry, put it over there.
Yeah.
God. Anyway, so calm face. I've rewatched the entire series of Vikings, and it's not perfect by any means. It's not perfect at all in terms of its presentation of the period.
Shield's the right shape.
The shields are the right shape, which is good compared to a certain other Last Kingdom TV show.
I was going to say Last Kingdom.
Yeah, Last Kingdom. The shields are the right shape, but actually, in that sense, the portrayal, for example, of especially the British, or more to the point, I suppose, the Saxon kingdoms, those people who would eventually identify themselves as the English, is not the best. But I have very much enjoyed, I suppose, the spirit of that show. It has its heart in the right place. And for example, in the past, I've interviewed Steve Ashby of York University, who's consulted, and I think might still be consulting with them on the show. And it tries its best, I think, to show some of those things that actually, if we go all the way back to the beginning of this Christmas special, those things that the people pluck out of the Viking period and just run with as assumptions, it tries to show and challenge those assumptions in relatively gentle ways. So, for example, the idea that the Norse women were just there to look after their families, as some modern sort of alpha male-driven cultural proponents would extol the virtues of. That's very much challenged in this show. We have a very strong portrayal of women, and also the legal status of women, for example. Women, again, in that sense, I don't want those people just to go, oh, you're I believe the term is cooked. I hate that term. I hate how people are misappropriating the word cuckold these days. But anyway, beyond the status of women, there's also actually things like language. I adore the use of language in this show. Again, it's not perfect, but hearing the monks, especially the Athelstan, talking in Old English or in a dialect of Old English is magnificent. And the texture of the show, the way that people are living, the fact that people sometimes whole villages just contract terrible illnesses, the fact that you go through periods of starvation, these are little textures of the period that are often overlooked.
Absolutely, I'm completely with you on that. But I think also when we're talking about Vikings and these particular views of the Vikings, and we should also give a quick nod to Norsemen as well on the Norwegian TV this year, which did.
Now that is on Netflix. Yes,
it is on Netflix, yes. And we reviewed it at the time. Shot on location at a recreated Viking village in Norway, and actually, like most programs, most TV dramas, it's actually more about us than it's about the past, but it's still great fun and looks great. I'm completely with you about the look and texture of Vikings. I think it's as I say, compared to The Last Kingdom, which is probably over designed and conceptualized and stylized in a way. You wonder why they took those particular decisions when.
Well, you see, again, as we've just been talking, I'm starting just to sort of rub my knees. I'm rocking back and forward here because, as we talked about earlier with the Britannia TV series, The Last Kingdom obviously it's based on a Bernard Cornwell book.
Series of novels, yeah.
A series of novels. A series of novels. And I know that I know that, for example, the character of I've forgotten what his name is now. Uhtred of Bavenda. Uhtred. Yeah. Son of Uhtred. I know that he is obviously a fictitious character, but there are things that they do in that TV series that are just needlessly incorrect. Yeah. And I've established this and talked about this in other videos and all this kind of thing. But one of the things that kind of upsets me in that series is it's for example the portrayal of cities like Durham. You know, yeah. Durham is on a promontory. It is on a rock sticking up in the air, surrounded by a river. It is not on a flat piece of land. Never has been, and never could have been mistaken for being on a flat piece of land. Little details like that you just think, why? Why not just find a little hillock, anything, just a raised piece of just anything? And yeah. That upsets me. You've taken me there. You've taken me there, Andy. Why did you take me there? It's Christmas. Sorry.
Sorry. I'm sorry. No. It's. I suppose ultimately, whether or not you have a historical consultant, and I'm reminded of the old joke that the place of a historical consultant in Hollywood is somewhere between the T-boy and the studio cat.
Yeah.
It's the serious point behind that is that in the end you're not dealing with an academic paper, you're dealing with a creative process.
But the thing
we can have the argument about if you're going to use historical material as the basis of your.
Just do a little bit. I'm not arguing against Utrecht existing. I'm not arguing against all manner of weird things that they do in that TV series. But the idea of just something. If you're naming places, if you're naming people, if you just no. Anyway.
Sometimes just practical things about it. You know, they shoot Last Kingdom, I think, in Hungary.
Yeah.
So
and Hungary is just a perfectly flat place with there's no raised ground in Hungary, is there? Of course not.
No, but don't forget, if you're moving a unit around, it costs money, and so you'll limit the number of locations.
Yes. Anyway, Vikings is worth watching.
Absolutely.
Also, actually, just one final thing. Actually, the soundtrack is excellent. I really enjoy the music in that series. Wardruna, I believe, is the Norwegian, I think, band or Icelandic band who do lots of the music there. In fact, the lead vocalist appears as the head bard of the town.
Right,
in the series, yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. So I strongly recommend it.
It's great, isn't it? We're doing that modern Christmas thing. We're doing the box sets. We're sitting down with the remote.
No, we are. You've just slightly deflated me though. Okay, right. The final topic. Let's do the shake. I don't know why I'm shaking. There's only one thing left in here, but here we go. And let's see.
Is it what you always wanted?
Dunelm House. Discuss. Go on.
It's just what you always wanted.
It's just what I always wanted. Yes. Great. Okay, just to give you a little bit of background. Oh, I'm going to throw that in my coffee now. Hang on. Hang on. Let me just retrieve this. I don't want... Oh, what a mess. Okay. Just a little bit of background for those of you at home. I attended a lovely university in the northeast of England called Durham University. And that university has, amongst its
architectural treasures.
Amongst its properties and assets, a certain 1970s, 1960s, 1950s, who cares? A building built in the past, but in that point in the past when brutalism in particular was very fashionable, very cutting edge. And this building became, in particular, the home of the Students' Union. There's a couple of bars there, and also as well some admin is housed in the building. And in conjunction with this building is a bridge that flies across at a quite an impressive height. Flies across the river that surrounds Durham, the aforementioned Durham that's on the promontory surrounded by a river. Flies across this. Hungary. Yeah. Flies across that river. And it is notable for the fact that most local residents, most students who spend any time in that building, most people who just casually drive past it, notice it, I suppose, as standing out, shall we say. Now, for me, I think it's ugly as sin. I think it is sometimes even a dangerous building to be in. It's got some very curious design elements that don't make it the most user friendly, especially if one has imbibed. But which obviously I imbibed a little bit at university.
I was going to say that would never happen at the Students' Union, would it?
No, of course not. But this particular form of architecture does have its admirers, and I believe you are one of those admirers, aren't you, Andy? Concrete
brutalism is something that's grown on me over the years. From the first time as a teenager, I visited Dennis Lasdon's National Theatre on the South Bank in London, which to some people is a concrete temple to the dramatic arts, and to others is a hideous concrete bunker. I'm very much in the former category, and I think Dunelm House is there's a campaign currently to preserve it because it's being threatened with demolition, and one of the quotes that's being wheeled out is that it's the one of the greatest adornments modern architecture was given to a medieval city. It is a spectacular piece of industrial design, and in juxtaposition with the bridge, it sort of echoes the cliffs of the gorge in the way the concrete cascades down. It uses its setting wonderfully, I think. It's just a piece. It's a piece. Yeah, great architecture is also industrial sculpture in the landscape, and I think Dunelm House is that. I think the point I make really is as a culture, enough people think that too, that we should be very, very careful before we allow buildings like that to be destroyed.
I see. Well, the thing is, right, is that this is where I suppose the banter element comes in here. Yeah. Is that it's. I understand that this is the reason why these protections are in place, because actually most people don't like everything, and it's entirely possible, in fact it is entirely unpredictable, that people will both love and hate this building, and therefore actually there has to be some neutral element that is assessing it based upon its merits. But I suppose I would say that this thing doesn't compare to things like, even for example, like the Guggenheim or something like that. It doesn't compare to. It's not that cutting edge and astonishing as a piece of architecture compared to others. It is. I take your point in so much as it could be, at best, in the right light, seen as an interesting abstract of that geology, in particular of the riverbank, and the bridge I think is quite funky and it is quite impressive. In fact, at times when you're walking across it, it almost feels as though it is defying gravity. It feels as though it shouldn't in the middle be that solid, but it has been made in that way. But I can't help but wonder whether or not, in the spirit of modernism and other things like brutalism and all this kind of thing, that perhaps we need to accept that some buildings rightly should be wiped away and challenged, and perhaps replaced, by a better idea, if you see what I mean. And I suppose the only reason why I say that is as someone who used the building, who went there certainly once a week, if not daily at times. It's surely architecture needs to serve the people who use the building. Surely.
Yeah, but I mean, nobody's pretending that it should be preserved in aspect. I mean, there are things that you can do to buildings to bring them up to date, to make them more accessible, for example, because of modern requirements and for things like access, disability and access, and so on. So that can be taken on board at the same time as preserving. I think the thing is, we are losing, and I think certainly in the architectural profession, there seems to be a growing concern, actually, that we are losing a whole generation of buildings, some of them really exceptionally good, just really for the sake of money and convenience. Another one, there's an iconic estate called Robin Hood Gardens in North London, which is being demolished as we speak. And there was a very strong campaign to save that. It's again a unique piece, really, of industrial design. It was flats linked with aerial walkways.
And is that the if I recall, that's the thing where a section is going to be on display at the V&A, isn't it? It's the Victorian
exactly. This was seen as important enough in terms of design, for even though it's going to be demolished, for a section of it to be literally cut out and saved, and is going to be, as you say, on display at the Victorian Albert Museum.
Is that going to be the sort of the facade, or an actual? Can you go into a flat, perhaps?
So I don't know, to be honest.
Right.
It's and I mean, obviously the building is only just being demolished, so in terms of how it's what remains is going to be displayed. That will come in due course, but. It's other buildings have gone. I mean, again, in your area in the northeast, the Get Carter car park. Was it Biker? I can't remember.
Gateshead.
Gateshead. The multi-story car park in Gateshead that's iconic in cinema terms, from the Michael Caine movie, the original good version of Get Carter, rather than the remake, completely unnecessary remake. But that went in spite of a campaign to save it, because it was seen again as culturally important, as well as a piece of
but actually that car park was largely seen as not fit for purpose. It was a dangerous space. The cafe area on the top of the car park, I believe, was never opened because it was inaccessible. It was dingy, and actually there were whole portions of that Get Carter car park, as it became known, which would genuinely dangerous. I mean, they were places where it was never light, no matter what you lit it, no matter what the lighting arrangement was, and people, it was a risk. People could be mugged. I do believe it was a hot spot for crime. Architecture has to be primarily functional, and I think sometimes the aesthetics can be prized ahead of the function. But I suspect this is something that we're going to be returning to a few times in the future, perhaps.
There are lots of dark and dingy spaces in your average medieval castle.
Yeah, but your average medieval castle isn't somewhere where people park their car every day. It's not a place where you have to go to get your student ID confirmed. You need a membership. And ideally a tour guide to go around in your average medieval castle.
Oh dear. I think
1 point to me.
I'm sorry. I'm not conceding. This is only the first leg.
Okay. Oh dear.
I think we've done pretty well actually in this discussion, because we've broken all the rules of Christmas get-togethers. Don't discuss anything controversial. and just
Yeah.
eat, drink, and be merry.
And we're still friends at the end of it. I haven't flipped a table. You're not going to sort of go away and start bitching about me to the rest of the family.
No.
Everything's fantastic.
It's the season of goodwill and good architecture.
Absolutely, absolutely.
See what I did?
Well, I suppose all that remains is to wish you a very Merry Christmas.
And you, Mark, and everybody who's still watching.
Yeah,
have a
absolutely.
fantastic
Merry Christmas.
Winter,
Well,
have a
Merry-
fantastic winter festival of your choice.
Yes, yes.
And hope, a happy and peaceful 2018.
Absolutely, absolutely. I suppose just finally, just very quickly, what are you hoping for 2018?
That's a very good question. I would like world peace and to work with poor sick puppies.
Okay.
No, I mean it's that old Miss World question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Back in the day when they used to have atrocities like that.
I didn't realise you entered that competition.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got the look.
Back in the day.
I think we covered it in the conversation. I think we need some certainty. I think archaeologists, heritage people, need to be more assertive about how we see the future of the things that we care about, because otherwise we're going to get rolled over.
Yeah, the future of the past. Absolutely. Okay.
Yep.
Well, for my part, I'm hoping, and I've got everything crossed that my camera comes back from New York. It's been there since September, and I'm just being, as they say, jerked about by the company who currently holding it hostage. So here's hoping.
Because last we heard there was a new one was meant to be winging its way across the Atlantic to you, wasn't it?
It was. Yes.
So it's disappeared somewhere in the Bermuda Triangle, has it? Or
Well, they sent me a tracking number that doesn't exist apparently. And goodness knows where we're up to. I mean, we're going to be diving back into that situation this evening on the phone. It should be fun, because obviously slrhut.co.uk, and I don't mind naming them actually in this instance, aren't UK based. As I say, they're based in New York, so I can't contact them during the day, like when I would like to. So that's my big hope for the new year, along with actually that we see some sensible solutions to these problems that are coming up. And anyway, peace on earth, goodwill to all men and all that. And here's looking forward. Here's looking at you, kid. That's all. That'll do, pig. That'll do, and all those other things.
it's goodbye from him, and it's a goodbye from me.
Yeah, it's goodbye from him.
There we are.
Now that you should have got that out sooner, when I was all depressed about brutalism.
Look, this is brutalist fashion.
Yep.
Actually, no. It's not brutalist. It's playful. It's postmodern, isn't it?
Postmodern fashion. Yeah.
It's an ironic comment on the commercialisation of Christmas.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And look. This is my reindeer saying hello to your reindeer.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. There you go. Hello, Rudolph. Right. Yep. Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.